Why would someone cut the pearl straps first, then steal the graduation folder later? That doesn't sound accidental to me. That sounds planned, like she was trying to stop the graduation before it happened.
She needs humility. My mother-in-law said that while holding the scissors, standing over my daughter's graduation dress in pieces on her bedroom floor. My 16-year-old was just staring at it, frozen, because 12 hours before graduation, the custom blue satin dress she'd spent months saving for had been sliced straight through the middle. The pearl straps her late grandmother stitched on by hand were hanging by threads. And my mother-in-law wasn't even sorry. She kept saying the dress was too attention-seeking, that Ava needed to stop acting better than everyone else, just because she was valedictorian. I thought my husband was about to lose his mind. Instead, he walked into the room, looked down at the ruined dress, picked up one of the cut pearl straps, and went completely silent. Then he pulled out his phone, made one quiet call, and said, "Send me every record she tried to delete." That's when my mother-in-law stopped smiling. For a second, nobody moved. The only sound in the room was Ava trying not to cry. Before we continue with this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. She was still wearing one heel because Diane had dragged the dress off the mannequin so fast it knocked everything over beside her vanity. Makeup brushes were scattered across the carpet. Her graduation sash was half-cut and hanging off the desk chair. And sitting right in the middle of the floor were the sewing scissors Diane always kept downstairs in the kitchen drawer. I finally snapped out of it and stepped between them. "What is wrong with you?" I asked her. But Diane crossed her arms like she was the victim here. "You should be thanking me," she said. "That girl walks around this house like she's already better than everybody else." Ava looked up at her with tears running down her face. "It was just a dress." "No," Diane shot back immediately. "It was showing off." That part made my stomach turn because the dress wasn't flashy. It wasn't inappropriate. It was soft blue satin, knee-length, simple except for the pearl straps Ava's grandmother had sewn onto it before she passed away 2 years earlier. Ava had been terrified to even wear it because she didn't want anything to happen to it. And now it was destroyed. I looked toward Ethan, waiting for him to finally say something. But he was still staring at the dress. Not angry. Focused. That's when I noticed something strange. The straps had been cut first. Not the skirt. Not the zipper. The straps with the pearls. Ethan noticed it too. His eyes slowly lifted toward his mother. "Where's the folder?" he asked. The room went quiet again. Ava frowned through tears. "What folder?" "The graduation speech folder," he said calmly. "The one you kept in your closet." Diane's expression changed for half a second. Just enough for Ethan to see it.
Wait, why cut the pearl straps first, then suddenly ask about a missing folder? That doesn't sound emotional anymore. What was she actually looking for?
And that's when he walked past all of us toward the bedroom door and said something that made my blood run cold. "If it's missing," he said quietly, "we're calling the police tonight." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ava standing there in that bedroom trying not to fall apart while Diane acted like she'd done something noble. Around 2 in the morning, I walked downstairs and found the dining room light still on. Ethan was sitting at the table surrounded by papers. Bank statements, printed emails, old receipts. And right in the middle of everything was Ava's empty graduation speech folder. My chest tightened immediately. "You found it." Ethan nodded once, without looking up. "In Mom's closet." I pulled out a chair beside him. Why would she even take it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. His voice was controlled, but I could tell he was furious. Ethan only got quiet like this when he was trying very hard not to explode. Upstairs, I could hear Ava moving around in the guest room. She refused to sleep in her own bedroom after what happened. She'd spent the last hour trying to pin pieces of the dress together, even though it was hopeless. And the worst part? This wasn't even the first thing Diane had ruined. A few weeks earlier, Ava's debate presentation had mysteriously disappeared the morning of competition. Before that, one of her scholarship letters had been opened and accidentally misplaced. Diane always had excuses, always just believable enough that I let myself ignore the pattern. Now I felt sick for not seeing it sooner. Ethan suddenly slid one of the bank statements toward me. Several charges were circled in red. "What am I looking at?" I asked. He tapped the page. "Missing money." I frowned. "From our account?" "No," he said. Then he reached into the folder and pulled out a printed screenshot from an online resale listing. The photo showed a pearl bracelet. My stomach dropped instantly because I recognized it. It had belonged to Ava's grandmother, the same grandmother who helped make the dress. Before I could even process that, footsteps creaked above us. Diane was awake, and a second later, her voice drifted down from the staircase. "Maybe the school should hear the truth," she said calmly, "about how your daughter really got those scholarships." Then she smiled at Ethan like she thought she still had control. And Ethan slowly stood up from the table. "You need to leave," Ethan said. His voice wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. Diane stayed on the staircase, with one hand resting on the railing like she was daring him to challenge her. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You're acting like I committed some horrible crime because I cut up a dress." "Ava earned that dress," I snapped. "She paid for it herself." "No," Diane shot back. "She bought attention." Same thing. Upstairs, a door opened quietly. Ava had heard everything. The look on her face when she stepped into the hallway nearly broke me. She hadn't even changed out of her pajamas. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she was clutching the plain black backup dress our neighbor dropped off an hour earlier. Compared to the one Diane destroyed, it looked painfully ordinary. And Diane noticed. I could actually see satisfaction flicker across her face. "That's much better," she said. "Simple. Appropriate." Ava immediately turned away before anyone could see her cry again. Ethan moved toward the stairs so fast Diane actually stepped backward. "You don't get to speak to her anymore," he said. For the first time all night, Diane looked slightly unsure of herself. But then she recovered. "You think she's innocent?" Diane asked. "That girl has manipulated everybody in this house for years." Ethan didn't answer. He just walked past her and headed toward the front door. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To the school." My stomach tightened instantly. Graduation started in less than 3 hours. When we arrived at the auditorium parking lot, I thought maybe we could still salvage the day somehow. I was wrong, because Diane had followed us there. She was already standing near the entrance talking to 2 relatives and one of the other parents from the senior committee. The second she saw us, her voice got louder. "I'm just saying," she told them dramatically, "some kids know how to work the system better than others." I watched the confusion spread across people's faces as they glanced toward Ava. Then Diane delivered the line she knew would do the most damage. "Scholarships don't just appear out of nowhere." Ava stopped walking beside me. "You told people I cheated," she whispered. Diane opened her mouth again, but Ethan interrupted her by pulling a thick manila folder from under his arm. "You should stop talking now," he said quietly. Diane looked at the folder, and all the color drained from her face. The hallway outside the auditorium suddenly felt too small. Parents were moving around us carrying flowers and cameras. Seniors were laughing nervously near the entrance doors, and right in the middle of all of it stood Diane, staring at the folder in Ethan's hands like she already knew what was inside. "What is that?" one of Ethan's cousins asked carefully. Ethan didn't answer him. He kept his eyes locked on his mother. "I gave you a chance to tell the truth at home," he said. "You decided to come here instead." Diane forced out a laugh, but it sounded thin. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" He opened the folder. I caught flashes of printed screenshots, transaction histories, shipping labels. Then Ethan held up one page and asked, "Do you want me to explain why Grandma Evelyn's bracelet was sold through an online resale account under your name?" Diane's face went completely still. Behind me, I heard one of the relatives mutter, "What?" Ava looked confused at first, then hurt slowly replaced it. Because that bracelet had disappeared almost 8 months earlier. Diane had blamed the cleaning company. Ethan pulled out another page. "And the missing savings bond," he continued. "The one meant for Ava's college account." "Lower your voice," Diane hissed suddenly. That reaction told everybody more than enough. Ava stared at her. "You stole from me?" "It wasn't stealing," Diane snapped. "I was going to replace it." "When?" Ethan asked coldly. After the gambling debt disappeared, everything around us seemed to stop. Diane's eyes widened instantly. I turned toward Ethan so fast I nearly dropped my purse. Gambling debt.
He finally looked at me.
She owes more money than I thought, he said quietly. And Ava started noticing things missing. Now, it all connected. The destroyed debate project, the open scholarship mail, the stolen folder. Diane hadn't just hated the attention Ava received. She'd been trying to keep Ava distracted. Panicked whispers started spreading through the relatives standing nearby. One of Diane's sisters actually stepped away from her. Then the auditorium doors opened behind us. The principal walked over looking tense. "Ethan," he said carefully, "there are 2 officers here asking to speak with your mother." And for the first time since this started, Diane looked scared. Nobody in the hallway spoke. Diane looked from Ethan to the principal to the 2 police officers standing near the entrance doors like she was trying to calculate a way out of this. There wasn't one. One of the officers approached slowly. "Ma'am, we just need to ask you a few questions." Diane immediately pointed at Ethan. "This is ridiculous. He's twisting everything." But Ethan didn't even react anymore. He simply handed one of the officers the folder. And that's when I realized this had been building for much longer than I understood. The officer flipped through several pages while Diane's breathing became visibly uneven. Shipping receipts, online listings, bank transfers, printed messages, everything tied back to her. Ava was standing beside me, absolutely motionless. I don't think the theft even hurt her most in that moment. I think it was realizing the dress was never really about humility.
It was about control.
Ethan finally said what all of us were beginning to understand. She thought Ava was going to expose her. Diane whipped toward him instantly. "That's not true." "Yes, it is," he said. "Ava kept records of everything. Scholarship documents, account information, missing dates. Mom knew she was paying attention. That explained the folder. Inside it, tucked between drafts of Ava's valedictorian speech, were copies of scholarship banking forms and college paperwork. Ava had been organizing everything for months, preparing for move-in day. Diane had panicked. And when graduation got close, the day Ava would officially leave home and gain full control over her accounts, Diane lashed out. The officers quietly moved Diane away from the crowd while graduation staff tried pretending nothing was happening. But by then, several relatives had already seen the documents. And word spread fast. One aunt suddenly confronted Diane about borrowed money. Then another relative mentioned jewelry that had disappeared during Christmas. The entire story started unraveling in real time. But the moment I'll never forget happened 10 minutes later. Because despite everything, Ava still walked across that stage. She wore the plain black backup dress. Her hands shook when they called her name, and for a second I thought she might freeze completely. Instead, she stepped up to the podium and unfolded a printed copy of her speech one of the teachers had helped recover from the school email server. The auditorium went silent, and Ava looked directly out at the crowd before saying, "Some people confuse confidence with arrogance when they can't control you anymore." You could feel the entire room shift. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just honest. By the time she finished speaking, people were standing. I was crying. Ethan was crying. Even teachers near the stage were wiping their eyes. And Diane? She stood in the back hallway between the officers, listening while the audience applauded the girl she tried to humiliate. After the ceremony, one of the fashion department teachers pulled Ava aside and revealed something that nearly made her cry all over again. Several students had stayed overnight repairing what they could of the blue dress after hearing what happened. The damage wasn't perfect, but it was wearable. An hour later, Ava changed into it for graduation photos. The pearl straps had been carefully resewn by hand. When she walked outside wearing it, Ethan actually stopped talking mid-sentence, just staring at her. Because for the first time since the night before, she looked happy again. Diane never came back to the house after that day. Police reports were filed. More financial records surfaced. Several relatives cut contact completely after learning she'd borrowed and stolen from them too. And Tyler, the grandson Diane kept comparing to Ava, was furious when he learned she'd used him as an excuse for everything. The last photo from that day still sits framed in our living room. Ava standing outside the school in that repaired blue dress, holding her diploma, smiling into the sunlight. And in the far background, barely visible near the parking lot, is Diane sitting silently in the back seat of a car as it pulls away.
Sometimes the person calling someone arrogant isn't reacting to confidence at all. They are reacting to losing control. How many people hide that behind family concern until someone finally notices?